I have a very good friend of mine, wonderful person, and very, very well-known author, Robert Bauval, joining me for this hour to discuss something that I think we've all been seeing quite a bit in the headlines everywhere, the Vatican, the Pope change of power for the Church. Everybody has been kind of watching that, or at least they've heard about it from the very least. But we have Pope Francis, the Vatican, and its occult designs tonight. Under the Pope's nose, the architect, the astronomer, and the Vatican. Who was behind the occult heretical design of St. Peter's Piazza on the Vatican? We're going to be talking about that tonight. International best-selling author and founder of the Orion Theory, Robert Bauval, joins me from Spain to discuss his soon-to-be-released book called The Vatican Mystery, The Quest for the Hermetic City of the Sun, who co-authored with Chiara Dianelli. I hope I pronounced that correctly. He's giving his first interview in the United States right here on the Hillary Raimo Show, so you haven't heard any of this anywhere else. You don't want to miss this hour, so get comfortable and settle in because it's going to be fascinating. So welcome, Robert. Thank you for returning.
Hi, Hillary.
So we have this fabulous book that's coming out. Why don't you share what it's all about with everybody?
Yes. First of all, let me just pronounce the name of my co-author. It's Chiara Dianelli. She is a Roman author. She lives in Rome. And she has recently published a book on Dante's Inferno, which is, of course, very appropriate because Dan Brown is coming up with a fictional book. Well, this book is my opus, really. It's been an adventure writing it, and I feel like I've been in some sort of detective story over the last year, spanning over 200 years in the time of Western history that is the most exciting. The Renaissance, the Italian Renaissance, literally the rebirth of the Western world. And the conclusion and thesis of this book is really mind-blowing. I know I'm going to use a kind of cliche, but it kind of makes Dan Brown's Angel and Demons look like a Sunday school stroll in Central Park. I mean, this is the real thing with very exciting characters, although it's non-fiction and it's amazingly well. I'm blowing my trumpet, but it's really very well researched, mainly because I've had the help of various people, and particularly a professor at the University of Rome, La Sapienza. It's in fact the largest university in the world, oddly enough. And we got together over the last 5 months, he in Rome and me here. I've been to Rome many, many times, of course, because of this book, digging very, very deeply into the archives and the letters and the documents to come up with this amazing conclusion. So that's what the book is about, and there are some very colorful characters. One of them, which I'll be talking about somewhere along the line on this interview, is a very odd person. I think you'll be very interested in this person, Hillary. She is Queen Christina of Sweden, who plays a major role in the Renaissance, or rather the late Renaissance, for something that she did, which kind of stunned the whole of Europe. But anyway, let me get into the meat of this. Can I go on, or you have?
Yes, please. No, please. Well, I think it's fascinating because I really don't know too much about the book. It hasn't really been released yet, and nothing. So really, everything you're willing to share with us, we would love to hear it. Please continue.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, let me tell you a little bit more about the machinery of publication, because the book is just being edited at the moment. It's rather unusual for us to give interviews that early, but because you asked me, and because I think it's the right moment really to put people in the picture, not only of this book, but what's going on at the Vatican. A very exciting moment in history for the Western world, really. And basically, what is going to happen in the next few months is that I'm actually editing at the moment the approach that I have and my publishers have. By the way, they're Inner Traditions in Vermont. They've been publishing all my latest books recently. Very good publisher. I'm very pleased with them. Mm-hmm. And they've got now the first draft. I'm going through an edit. They will be getting the edit in about 3-4 weeks. Then I go through with them, and the book should be out sometime in November, I hope. So that's what's going to happen. So we're rather early for.
It is early, but like you said, it's we have this is in everybody's mind and consciousness right now because it's just everywhere. We've had this big shift of power. Before we get into the book, what do you feel? How do you feel about this transition, about the Pope resigning and then having Pope Francis come in to take his place?
I was born a Catholic in a very Catholic family in Egypt. In the days when I was born, where you were still somewhere in the ether, I think, Hillary.
I was traveling through the stars, Robert.
Yes, I was born in 1948, so that kind of sets the scene. And in those days, particularly in the city of Alexandria, Christianity was really a very big thing. It still is, surprisingly, even though it's a Muslim country. And so I grew up in this kind of very intense Catholic atmosphere. And when I left Egypt when I was nearly 20, I was sent to England to finish my studies, and I was put, of all places, to finish my higher education, my school education, at a Franciscan college where I was a boarder. So I lived for 2 years with those Franciscan priests, whom, by the way, I have great admiration for them. But I did revolt and rebel against Catholicism, not in an aggressive way, but basically mainly because of my studies, especially when I started studying comparative religion and Egyptian religion. And the bottom line is that what's going on at the moment is very, very interesting. Having looped from my early days in Egypt to now, many people are not really aware of the dramatic change. They've heard about it. First of all, the rather strange resignation of Pope Benedict XVI. I mean, this is, from an historical point of view, it is really stunning. A pope can indeed leave his office, but he cannot be fired. It's one of those positions. He's there for life, and usually a pope stays for life. The change of pope is when one pope dies and the other one comes in. But it happened before in history for different reasons. But this time, even though the official reason is that he was getting old and tired and felt he could not deal with the intricate and heavy load of the Catholic Church with all its problems, as we all know, I think that the decision has a very strong political aspect to it, and this is apparent from the choice made, the voting that happened a couple of weeks ago for the new Pope, Pope Francis I. Shall I go on a bit on this?
What did you think? What did you think of his name choice?
Well, it's an odd one because, like I said, I was putting your listeners in the picture because, first of all, one thing that is very clear with this Pope is that he surprised everybody, including the Curia in Rome, including the cardinals apparently, with the choice. He is rather old. He's in 84, I think. And he is not, sorry, I didn't give his age right. He's over 70. And he, of all things, he is he's the first in many things, by the way. He's the first Jesuit Pope. I'll talk about this in a minute. He's the first Pope from outside Europe. He's the first Pope from the Americas. He's definitely the first Pope from South America. And he's the first Pope to choose the name Francis. So he's got a lot of firsts to his name, which attracts a lot of attention. But the first thing I reacted, because I knew about him, and I knew, I was writing the book, and as you will see or read when you get hold of a copy of this book, is that, and frankly, I had no idea, of course, that all this would happen, but this book that I've just finished, the Vatican Mystery, has an intense aspect of it related to the Jesuit order in the Renaissance. In fact, from the time that the Jesuit order was formed. And I'm jumping the gun here a bit, but the Jesuit order at the time was formed principally to act, as a counter-reformation movement. What was going on at the time was that the big surprise of the Christian world was that it split in two. Totally unexpectedly, because of course, Martin Luther, who comes to Rome in the bicentennial of the 16th century, is totally disgusted with the opulence of the papacy and their squandering of money and their indulgences and all these things. And he goes back to Germany and he writes his famous thesis. And suddenly the Christian world is split into two, with the Lutherans or Protestants and the Catholics on the other side. And hell breaks loose. And the game, apart from many wars that it produced, was to, on the one side, to convince the Catholics to become Protestants, and on the other side, to convince the Protestants to return to Catholicism. And yeah, it's still going on, by the way.
I don't think it ever stops. It's always a matter of somebody trying to convince somebody to do this. I know, but it just amuses me because it always feels like it's always, come to me kind of thing. Convert, be this, be that. It's silly.
Well, the reason I'm saying all this is because the Jesuit order is a converting machine. And that's the very reason why it was set. In fact, let me give you a background. I mean, it was founded by a group of Basque Spaniards. The principal founder was Ignatius of Loyola. They were actually soldiers. They were in France at the time, and they banded together a group of 7 men who became priests and proposed the founding of this order to the Pope. And the Pope loved it because they said, well, we'll set up a college and we'll train people under this Jesuit order to become converters, literally. The college, which at the time was called the Collegio Romano, was a propaganda college. It's still called the Propaganda College. And the idea was that they were going to be trained to go about, send missionaries, some very famous missionaries, which some of your listeners would know. For example, Saint Francis Xavier, who went to evangelize India very, very successfully. A large part of the Indian continent was converted to Catholicism and still is Catholic. And others, of course, went to South America and very, very successfully converted there. Now, their technique was very interesting, and this is what is much discussed in the book, and this is why it is intriguing to have today a Jesuit Pope. Let me explain why. Because their technique was they quickly realized that, of course, what was going on wasn't just the Catholics trying to get the Protestants back. Many countries in Europe had converted to Protestantism, Germany, Holland, most of the Scandinavian countries, England, of course. And the game became literally global because what happened more or less at the same time was the discovery of the New World by Columbus. And so suddenly there was all these new people all over the world that could be converted. And there was a kind of rush on the one hand by the Protestants, who managed to convert most of the Americas, North America, into Protestantism, mainly because of the British occupation. And on the other hand, the missionaries, the Jesuits, in South America, in Asia, in Africa. So this was the game, and it's quite amazing to knowing this, that suddenly out of 2,000 years of papacy, there is now at the seat of St. Peter one of these Jesuit cardinals who is at the head, literally at the head of Christendom, of Catholic Christendom. And he probably, in my view, was chosen precisely because of this, because the church is in desperate need for some very positive propaganda. It has lost many of its followers. You know of all the scandals, pedophilia, and all these issues. And this man, although I'm sure a very compassionate and wants to help the poor and all this business, but he is no choir boy. I mean, he knows very well. He's a marketing man. I mean, he is super marketing man and he's done extraordinarily well in a matter of weeks. I mean, it's amazing.
It feels to me like the church is going through this rebranding kind of phase, internationally, trying to convert people back to it, get people back to it, and change the image and do damage control. Do you think that he's going to do that, or do you think that this is just kind of an attempt to cover up the other stuff?
Well, don't expect too much from a reformation. The whole point of the Catholic Church is that it sits on very, very stringent dogmas and doctrines that no pope is going to change. This is something that everybody has to understand, that the Catholic Church has, in a sense, its own constitution. Or rather the Nicene Creed that was signed and sealed, a bit like the founding fathers of America, by a group of cardinals in the 4th century. Hello?
Oh, yeah. Can you hear me still? Yeah, we're here.
Yeah. And this is known as Nicene Creed. It was signed by 200 bishops plus in Nicaea in Turkey, and that's it. That's the constitution, and you know how difficult it is to change a constitution. It might have a few addendums. It's had a few throughout Christian history, but very mild. No, what this Pope is going to do is he's going to change the image of the Church, and here we come to the choice of name, because frankly the name is dualistic. On the one hand, because he's a Jesuit. Many people are wondering if he really meant, when he said, my name is Francis, if he really meant Francis Xavier, the co-founder of the Jesuit movement. Now, and of course, there is Francis of Assisi, who founded the Franciscan movement. Now, it is a very, very clever symbolism, because Francis of Assisi, certainly in Catholicism, and certainly in Italy, is the most popular saint you can imagine, and he, in the 13th century, managed to bring back an enormous amount of people into the Catholic fold, mainly the poor. Francis of Assisi proposed literally a new approach, which was more or less what this new Pope is doing. The new approach was, he was shocked too by the opulence of the Church and the opulence of the Vatican, and he formed an order known as the shoeless. They used to go barefoot and work with their hands, and the people loved them. And he was very genuine. Francis is one of my heroes of history. So this new Pope is sending the message that he wants to go back to the root of Christianity, which is apostolic. Apostolic means these very first apostles, if you like, that went wandering around, like the 12 apostles of Christ, without all the trappings of the church, and got people into the fold. So it's his approach, and he's done exceedingly well. I mean, I was saying earlier that my friends in Rome are saying this is amazing. I mean, suddenly there's a kind of surge in interest in the church. People are rushing to see him walk in the street, and he's shaking hands and kissing babies and all this business. He is doing very well.
I understand. The enthusiasm is wonderful. But see, what I question is, will people be able to get over the scandals that have crippled the church, specifically the abuses to children, and along those lines? I mean, so much of that has come out and become public. How do you think he's going to handle, or how people should view this pedophilia kind of string that goes through the Catholic Church that has become so public over the years?
Yeah, I want to tell you what a very senior Freemason told me once, and he was absolutely right. I mean, the fact that sometimes there are Freemasons who are caught red-handed in conspiracy deals or in corruption doesn't mean that they're all that way. And but it does attract attention. But let's face it, pedophilia occurs much more outside the priesthood than it does in the priesthood. But of course, we don't want to see priests doing that sort of thing. But I think his approach will be to do a great mea culpa, and that's what he proposed. They're going to say sorry and start new. I mean, he wants to clean the slate, and he's made it known. I mean, he's made it known to the cardinals that this is what he expects the church, literally the whole body of the church, to do, is to apologize, to admit to its faults, and that's it, not to do again. He's very clever, I have to say he is, because you know me, Hillary, I've been a great student of symbolism and that kind of approach, which I suppose you could call marketing, but
I wouldn't call it marketing.
No, but this is propaganda at the highest of level. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that he's an evil propaganda conspirator, but they are using propaganda. I mean, one of the big tools of the church is propaganda, and they won't deny that. But one of the big acts, you have to understand that there are certain things that these very big preachers, these rabbis, if you like, these magicians, call them what you like. I mean, Christ, Jesus, must have been one of those. And one of the scenes that comes to mind as we were talking now, this business about saying I'm sorry, is the scene, you're going to like this, the scene of the Testament where Maria Magdalena, who is regarded as a terrible sinner, and she has committed all sorts of adulterous acts, and the crowd, the Jewish crowd, wants to punish her according to God's law. They want to stone her to death, and they chase her in the street, and she falls at the feet of this magician, this propaganda guy, like this very first pope, if you want. And he does something quite extraordinary. I mean, he's confronted with a bunch of very aggressive, determined people who believe that they're going to do God's law, and they're very, very, very angry with this woman. And they're holding stones, and they want to stone her to death. And what he does two things. He tells the crowds, you know the famous words, who has not committed a sin, cast the first stone. And he's not just saying those words. He must have looked at them in such a way that he literally humbled them. But what he's doing, a lot of people don't realize what he's doing. He's actually changing what these people believe to be God's law. He is reforming the Hebraic, the Judaic religion there and then. This is quite extraordinary. But what he does with the woman is his famous words. He says, stand up, say you're sorry, and start all over again. And this is what this man wants to do. And if he's going to do it, he's very good at this. And in fact, that's what is needed. I mean, if one wants to have Catholicism, I'm not so sure if it's such a good thing, but if it's going to survive, it's going to need that act, that amazing act where he does this with Mother Church, if you like. He will say, stand up, say you're sorry, and start afresh.
So it's like healing the rift, really, isn't it?
Yes, but yes, you're absolutely right, Hilary. But it's something very difficult to convey to, especially on radio this way. But the acts, literally the acts of such a natural magician. I see Jesus as a magician. I don't mean it in the negative sense. My book, by the way, talks a lot about magic, because this was happening within the church in the 16th century, but this is another topic. The act and the way it's done, and the choice of context, and the choice of symbolism, the gesture, the way the words are pronounced, have a tremendous effect. And what people have to realize is that the Pope is no more a man, if you like. He is a symbol. He is a walking, living, breathing symbol. And what a symbol he is. Every move he makes, every gesture he takes, everything he says, everything he does, is going to act as a sign, a powerful symbol. And he knows this. He knows this very, very well. Believe me, he knows this because he is a well-trained Jesuit of that order. That's the whole purpose of the Jesuit order, is to train people who know this. And he's now literally at the very head. He's at the top of the pyramid, and he's watched. And he does, and he says, so far, what has very much pleased those who hardly 2 weeks ago were very, very angry and upset and even thinking of getting out of Christianity. So he's the man. He is the man.
He's the man.
Oh yeah.
Well, I have to ask you this.
I love this man.
Well, I mean,
Sorry?
I'm curious, now I know this might be getting off topic slightly here, shifting into a different direction, but this change, this patriarchal, legacy, where does the feminine energy come into? Where does the goddess of energy, the energy of the goddess come into this? I mean, we're talking about, hold on. I mean, we're talking about healing this rift, and I think people overall are ready for the balancing of that energy, or at least a better representation of that energy within the church. Do you suppose he will bridge that somehow?
He's already doing it, Hilary. He is doing it big time. First of all, the patron saint of the Jesuits, although it's a totally men-only club, if you like all the priesthood, is the goddess, or let's put it this way, the Virgin Mary. I'll send you the logos of the Collegio Romano. He did his great first symbolic act by giving his first papal mass at the church of Santa Maria Maggiore, the most prominent church of the Madonna. He is a follower of the Madonna, and so are most Argentinians, by the way. So he is very, very, very conscious about the feminine aspect of this religion. You've got to realize that the Christian religion, from a historian point of view, and coming back to my book now, the Vatican Mystery, is that, to me, it's nothing more or nothing less than the metamorphosis of the pagan religions, particularly the Isaic, the religion of Isis. To historians, it's very, very obvious. The whole machinery of ancient Egypt, when it was occupied by Rome, was used literally to create this new religion. I'll go into it in a minute, but so the main character, the main deity of this religion, coming from ancient Egypt, is the goddess, or more precisely, the celestial goddess, And there's no doubt in my mind that the Virgin, or at least the Virgin of the Roman Catholic Church, is none other than a metamorphosis of the goddess Isis. Indeed, many of the church fathers quite acknowledge this. But then again, I don't want to go into too much detail because it's all in the book. But
I'm being very quiet, so you just keep going and telling us a little more. So you feel that she's well represented?
There's no doubt. No, there's no doubt. Yeah, of course. I mean, don't misunderstand the Roman Catholic Church in that it is a patriarchal religion as such. It comes from Judaism, it comes from the Old Testament, which is intensely patriarchal. That's no doubt. But the Roman Catholic Church is intensely dualistic and particularly focused on the Virgin Mary. I mean, all you have to do is come to Spain, Hillary, and they don't pray to God. They don't pray to Jesus. They pray to the Virgin Mary. I mean, the Virgin Mary is the big thing here, and I mean. Half the population of Spain is called Maria, for a start. So you've got to see this. And although it's given itself a bad name because of what the priests have been doing, if I'm going to choose, but I'm non-religious in that sense. I mean, I'm an historian. I believe in my own way of looking at the universe. But if I was going to choose a religion, I would choose Catholicism, not because I was born one, but because it does have that aspect. I mean, what really has happened is that the names have changed, that's all. I mean, we have the Virgin Mary, who is so Isaiah that it's unbelievable that people don't see it so obviously. You will see in this book, by the way, and there's been many books. I mean, I'm not the only one who's written about this, but in this particular book, coming back to that topic, even myself, who had studied this on many occasions with Graham Hancock, as you know, when we wrote Talisman and the Master Game, we looked into all this. But in this particular book, I'm going very, very much behind the scene and bring it to the surface. So my whole approach is to bring all this out and make it very visible to everybody. I mean, I literally mean visible. And one of the things about this book, like my very first book, as you know, was the Orion correlation, the Orion Mystery, which presented the correlation between the stars and the pyramids of Giza, stars of Orion. You know that, don't you?
Yes, I know very well.
Say yes.
It is kind of rude for the host to interrupt the guest, so I don't.
I'm Egyptian. I'm from Egypt. You can interrupt me all the time.
And everybody who knows how often you come on the show knows that I love the sound of your voice. I love what you have to say, and so I love to listen. I do have a question. The City of the Sun is part of the title of your book. For those listening, what is that?
Well, the City of the Sun. Well, let me put it this way. This book literally opens up like a court case. It says, here is the Piazza St. Peter. Now, the Piazza St. Peter is this great, everybody's seen it on television lately. It's this great elliptical giant square. They call it a square, but it's in fact an ellipse. With the obelisk right in the middle, and you saw it lately on television, where all these hundreds of thousands of people gather to see the Pope at the Basilica, the church, coming out of his balcony. So the piazza is this square, and the book literally opens with like a court case. I imagine a jury sitting on the side. And I imagine one prosecution saying, this piazza, as amazing as it sounds, is designed using Johann Kepler, the famous astronomer, using Kepler's first law of planetary motion. And when you look at Kepler's diagram, very famous Kepler's diagram, it's precisely that. So it looks like it, but the question is it meant to be the same? And the defense, on the other hand, says, no, it's nothing to do with that. It represents the open arms of the church, of Mother Church, welcoming all the people in the square. So there you are. You have two totally opposing views, the prosecution and the defense. And the question is, okay, we present the case. And to present this case, I've had to spend several years in detail, 6 months of writing this book, going to Rome something like 20 times over the last 2 years. And the story, amazingly, starts in Egypt and ends, I'll give you the precise date, it ends in 1656, when the architect Bernini, and your listeners would know of him. He's the big hero in Angels and Demons, the architect Bernini, the papal architect, the great Baroque architect Bernini, is commissioned by the Pope, at the time Pope Alexander VII, and around them is a group of people, I will talk about this in a minute, and he's commissioned to design the piazza. So the book starts in ancient Alexandria, hops very quickly to the Renaissance, 200 years of events leading to that moment. And
I just want to interrupt for 1 second and remind or to let listeners know that there is a wonderful article on Robert's website. The link is on the archive page of my homepage here on Achieve Radio. It's called Under the Pope's Nose. If you Google that and Robert Bauval, you will come up with it. It's a wonderful oversight of what he's talking about at this point here, too. So I just wanted to let people know they could bring that up while they're listening to read after the show. Please continue.
Well, fine. I'm grateful you did this. because it's very good because they can actually see what I'm saying. It's there in images. Anyway, the point is this, that having presented the case in great detail, hello? Sorry about this. It's going silent.
That's okay. Yeah, we can hear you fine. The line is okay on this end. Yep.
Yeah, okay. Having presented the case, as I've just described, then the reader is sitting there like the jury, and I quite assure you, it's very much like my first book. You know, when I said 3 pyramids look like the 3 stars of Orion's belt, well, at first a lot of people were saying, well, yeah, but it could be a coincidence and all that. But when you present the case, when you look at all the evidence, when you look at all the people involved, and this, unlike the story of the pyramids, it's much more recent history. So we have letters, we have documents, we have the characters, and believe me, they're wonderful characters. I mean, I actually fell in love with Christina writing this book, because I really have to tell you about her in a minute, because you're going to like this. Anyway, so the point is this: you present the case, and there you're looking at the piazza again, and according to me, you're going to have at least 10 people of the jury, if not the 12 of them, saying, no, it's not a coincidence. Now, what does it mean? What does it mean? I mean, well, first of all, it means something quite extraordinary, because this particular theory, this heliocentric theory, which began with Copernicus and modified by Kepler, was considered the most vile heresy at the time. It was, you would literally get burned if you were even to speak about it. So it's quite amazing that it is there under the Pope's nose, literally, as I say in the article. So the big question is, well, how the hell did it get done, and who was involved, but finally, what is it for? I mean, yeah, okay, it doesn't look like a coincidence, but what for? And this is the most exciting thing about this book, is that in order to understand what for, the book very carefully, I'm cooking it very slowly now, because what the reader has to understand is what I call now, and many other authors who have been involved with this are beginning to call, talismanic magic. You remember we had this long talk once on one of your shows?
I do, yes.
And that is the difficult one, because people have to understand this and then realize a bit, very well, I'll bring it as an analogy, very much like when I wrote my first book and I showed, and it was shown on television, and they keep showing it, by the way, on History Channel, on Ancient Aliens, this correlation. And the funny thing is that there it was for 5,000, maybe more years. Nobody had seen it. It was there. Nobody saw it. And then I say, oh, well, look at 3 stars, 3 pyramids, and here is the reason why it doesn't look like a coincidence. And suddenly, I've activated this talisman. Suddenly the pyramids have a different meaning altogether. And every time people look at these pyramids, every time people look at the stars, they are affected by this talisman. It's become alive. I'll give you a very good metaphor in simple terms. It's like bringing a child at Christmas time in a darkened room, and he's there, and suddenly you plug in and you light up the Christmas tree. And there it is. It's lit up. It's visible. You can see it. It has a tremendous effect on the child. And this is the same thing with the talisman. I've lit up literally the pyramids. They begin to shine, if you like stars in the mind of people who see them. Same thing with this piazza. Believe it or not, it's going to sort of do the same thing as the 3 stars and the 3 pyramids. It's going to become alive. And people will see it for what it is and what it means. And that's it. It will never be seen again as a simple architectural square.
So do you feel that can be applied to any significant monument in the world if it's lit up the right way?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, as you know, I've written a book, a 600-page book with Hancock in 2004. Which proposes precisely that, is that we looked at various cities like, Rome, although we briefly touched Rome, but Paris, London, Washington in particular, where there is this city and city plans with monuments in very strategic places, and suddenly they become alive when somebody points out and says, hey, look, this monument is aligned with this other one, and it looks at the sunrise at this particular day, and so forth. Because that's what almost certainly these architects had in mind, and these town planners had in mind. We know with Washington, D.C. that there was a strong Masonic influence.
What do you say to the people that suggest that the alignments, the Masonic involvement has to do with more of a negative connotation than a more positive one?
Well, like Catholicism, it depends on which side of the fence you're on. But there's a big hissing noise. Are you getting that, Hillary?
No, I don't hear it. I hear you clear. Yeah. It
stopped now. I think it was your friend Bill. Okay.
Bill's my producer, everybody.
Hi, Bill. How are you? You're very quiet. I hope you're enjoying this. All right. Well, you've asked the question because there's a kind of very negative tag, almost diabolical tag that is placed on these kind of schemes. And I don't think it's right at all. The intention, well, first of all, bear in mind what I said earlier on, is that when these things were being done, I'm talking more now of the Vatican design and the 16th century, 17th century, when these things were done, not just in Rome, by the way, in Paris, in London, it was part of a big propaganda activity related to the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation. In other words, that the Protestants were doing such things in order to create these giant, powerful messages, talismans, monumental architecture, to draw back people into, or rather pull people from Catholicism into Protestantism. And the other way around, from the Catholic point of view. So you got cities like Paris, which was at the time intensely, and still is intensely Catholic, doing this kind of games. Now, later on, one of the big players that came into that fold were the Freemasons. The Freemasons was even more clever, and they employed ancient symbolism like the others did, but much, much more effectively, in order to do the very same thing. And this is precisely what Washington, D.C. is. It is a giant, I call it a giant city talisman. It is a giant temple, if you like, a Masonic temple, that people who not only live in there, but people who are aware of it or come to visit it, are imbued by the whole mood of this place, once they realize what it is. And the whole idea, the positive idea, is to make you think of what it represents, not simply because there are alignments. It makes you think of the tenets, makes you think of the constitution, if you like, of the Freemasons, which ultimately is nothing diabolical. It presents, and believe me, I'm not a Freemason, so I'm not advertising on their behalf. But it promotes the virtues of what they believe to be the important tenets of Western civilization. Brotherhood, freedom, equality, all these things. And even though they are extremely patriarchal, like the church, don't get them wrong. They have very, very powerful virtues that incorporate both sexes. So it is not diabolical. Yeah, I know there is a lot of conspiracy theories and they want to rule the world and the New World Order. No, sure, they do have a vision of a world order. There's no doubt about it. So does the church. But the idea is not to control the minds of people and to control the finances and so forth, although this is part of the mechanism. The idea is to install virtues. So from that point of view, I don't see it as a bad thing at all. And the same thing with Catholicism. I mean, they're not advertising pedophilia and all this business. Their virtues are very good. The problem with all these power structures is that, well, we know power can corrupt, and there are, unfortunately, hiccups in all the processes. I'm a very positively minded person, as you know, Hillary. So I look at a good thing in what appears to be a bad thing. I mean, I cannot conceive of a world without virtues. Now, whether they come from religious orders, religion is nothing more than a constitution, I mean, with belief systems, or whether they come from Freemasonry, or whether they come from our own government. But our government has lost track. They're more concerned with budgets. They're more concerned with inflation. Look at what's happening in Cyprus. They're more concerned with bank loans and all this business. And they're forgetting the most essential thing that holds a culture together in the right track, which I call the virtues. These have to be not only installed, but they have to be ingrained in the people. And then you have something good. This is my great belief. I mean, I'm getting to be an old man now. I'm nearly 60. Well, I'm in my 66th year, in case you're listening to this. But I'm still going strong, like Scotch whiskey, you know. And,
Robert, I'm curious, and I know we only have a few minutes left in the show, but what I'd like to ask you is how this book has changed you personally.
Well, this book has been a great adventure to me. I mean, I enjoy my books. I enjoy writing my books, but this one has got me, as the writer, thrilled. I mean, I'm actually don't want to let it go. I'm keep editing and editing because I'm enjoying the whole theme of it. It's an amazing detective sleuthing in the highest possible of manner. I mean, I hope you'll enjoy it as much as I did, because it takes you on an amazing mystery, magical tour of the most important time in our civilization, with characters, like I said, with Galileo and popes and the Renaissance philosophers, wonderful magicians like Ficino, Marsilio, the Cosimo di Medici, Queen Christina, which I didn't have a chance to talk about. Queen Christina, by the way, very quickly, is and will be. Many films have been done about her, by the way. We all forgot. I mean, a famous film by what's her name? Oh my God, the German famous actress. Come on, Marlene Dietrich, who played the role. But Queen Christina was the daughter of the King of Sweden. The King of Sweden, a Protestant country, was the deadliest enemy of the Pope. He formed the most powerful army in Europe during the 30-Year War, during this Reformation, Counter-Reformation battle, and brought the papacy to its knees. But then, unfortunately, he dies in battle, and she becomes queen at the age of 6. I mean, it's quite amazing. But at the age of 24, she has a nervous breakdown, by the way, and at the age of 24, stuns everybody because she says, I'm going to convert back to Catholicism, which in those days, even now, but it's like the Queen of England saying, I'm becoming a Catholic, you know. And she sends an incredible message, and the Pope invites her to Rome, and she settles in Rome, and she becomes virtually the Queen of Rome. She's an extraordinary character. She's like Cleopatra. She's a virgin, by the way. She lived her life as a virgin. She refused to marry. She was a great erudite. She could speak 9 languages, Hebrew and Arabic and Swedish and French. She spoke French better than the French, they say. And she studied the Hermetic tradition. She studied all the classics. She studied alchemy, Kabbalah, you name it. She was quite a lady. And she is there. She is there when Bernini is given the commission to design, and she is his best friend. They are buddies. So she is the key to this whole mystery. She brings with her an amazing vision. And believe it or not, it sounds crazy, but believe it or not, she is convinced that she is the reincarnated Isis. And that's the amazing story that comes out of this book. It's true. It sounds crazy, but it's true. And she behaves like
I can't wait to read it. You have me sitting on the edge of my seat, very excited to get my copy. And I hope everybody listening to the show is feeling the same way. It's the Vatican Mystery. It's going to be released this fall, 2013. And Robert, I can't tell you, we could probably sit here for another hour and it just keep going and going. It's always such a pleasure to have you here. And I know my listeners greatly enjoy you when you come to visit. So I just want to say thank you very much for being here. It's been an absolute joy to listen to you, and you just have lit me up literally, and I just can't wait to get on.
Well, thank you, Hilary. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure, and thank you for giving me the floor, because you're very good at this, and you know me. But let me let you into a little secret for the next interview. Somewhere on the left side of my chest there is a red button, and if you press it, I stop. Okay?
I will remember that. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure. Thank you.